Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, so today we will start with a new chapter in history, nationalism in India. Now, we have already done nationalism in Europe, and as you had seen, that modern nationalism in Europe, it came to be associated there with the formation of nation states, and it also meant that there was a change in the way people they understood themselves, and they now started to view themselves in different identity, and it also forged a sense of belonging to their nations, and new symbols and new icons, new songs and ideas, they made new links, and also new boundaries of different communities were redefined, and in most countries this making of the new national identity, it was a long process. Now how this consciousness or this national consciousness emerge in India, that we'll see in this chapter. Now in India, as well as in Vietnam and in other colonies, the growth of nationalism, now it was closely connected with the anti-colonial movement, because here like India, Vietnam and others which were colonies, now here freedom, it was not only just the formation of nation state, it was also the freedom from the colonial rule. And so people they began to discover their identity in this process of their struggle with the colonialism. Now if you remember what you have studied in class 8, that when you did nationalism there, the national movement, that the first thing that brought the people together was their common enemy. And so when they saw the Britishers at their common enemy, so this was the first thing that brought the people together. And so the sense of being oppressed under colonialism, now that was a shared bond, and it tied many different people together. But each class and each group, it felt the effects of colonialism in a different manner. So like different people were affected by colonialism in different manner, like the upper class, the elites, the Brahmins, or the people belonging to the lower caste. So all people, all different sections of society, they were now affected with colonialism in different ways. And what they understood of Swaraj, now that was also different. So different groups of people, they had their own concept of Swaraj. And the Congress under Mahatma Gandhi, they tried to forge these groups or make these groups into try to bring all these groups into one or under one movement. But many times this unity, it also did not emerge without conflicts. So when there'll be so many different types of people coming together, different social groups, different communities coming together, each having their own view of Swaraj, each having their own view of freedom, so conflicts are bound to happen. So the unity was there, but still there were some periods where there were so much conflict within this national movement. Now in earlier classes, that is what they're saying, that you have read about the growth of nationalism in India until the first decade of the 20th century. And here we will pick up from the 1920s, and we will study the non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement. And we will also see in this chapter that how the Congress, they tried to develop the national movement, and how the different social groups, they participated in the national movement, and how nationalism, it captured the imagination of the people. Means how the masses, they were attracted, they were brought into this national movement, and how the different social groups, they participated, what they thought each movement was to be, and how they understood the movement, and how they participated, what effects it brought about. All this we will see during the course of this chapter. Okay, so we will start with the First World War, the Khilafat, and the non cooperation movement. Now, in the years after 1919, now as you know, the First World War, it was from 1914 to 1918, and so in the years after 1919, we saw here the national movement in India. It spread to new areas, and new social groups came and joined the national movement, and new modes of struggle or protest that were taken up. And now, how we understand these developments and what implications all these things have, that we'll study now. First of all, the war. Now, it was not just a simple war, it was world war. So war created a very different economic and political situation. And there was a huge increase in the war expenditure or in defense expenditure. Now, if so much money was going there, then obviously the money that was spent for the people, it was less. And so lot of money was spent on defense expenditure, and this was financed because the money was less. And so it was also financed by war loans. So they took loans to fight the war. And then the taxes, they were also increased, and custom duties, they were raised, and new type of tax, income tax, it was also introduced. And all this was done to meet this new economic and political situation. Now, throughout the years the war was on, prices increased, and they doubled between 1913 and 1918. So obviously, if the prices will rise, the cost of living just being doubled, now it led to extreme hardship for the common people. And in this condition, war was on, world war was on, and villagers, when villagers was were called upon to supply soldiers. And there was forced recruitment in rural areas. And so forcefully, now even those who want to join the services, the military, they only as per their will they join. No one forces them to join. But at that time, the need for soldiers was so much that there was forced recruitment in rural areas, and it caused anger among the people. Then in 1918 and 1919, and then 1920 and 1921, crops failed in many parts of the country. Already the economic situation was so bad, and the political condition also, in there was it was so unstable. And in that condition, crops failed in many parts of the country, and it resulted in a huge shortage of food. So there was famine in many areas. And this was also accompanied by influenza epidemic. So on top of it, they had an epidemic. And according to the census of 1921, 12 to 13 million people, they died, they perished as a result of famines and because of the epidemic. And so that was the condition during the war years. And people hoped that their problems, that their hardships, it will end after the war. But that was not to happen, that did not happen. And at this stage, a new leader emerged, and he suggested a new mode of struggle. So Mahatma Gandhi, he returned to India in January 1915. And he was in South Africa practicing law. So there he had very successfully fought the white racist regime with a new method, a novel method, a new method of mass agitation. And this is what he called as Satyagraha. Now, according to Gandhiji, what was all this Satyagraha about? Now, it emphasized the power of truth, because it is like Satya. So it was based on truth and the need to search for truth, to look out for truth. And according to Mahatma Gandhi, if the cause for what you are fighting for is true, and if the struggle is against injustice, then there was no need to take up arms or to be violent. Physical force was not necessary. And without being aggressive and without seeking revenge, Satyagrahi, he would be able to win the battle with non-violence also. And according to Gandhiji, this could be done by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. It is like you make the oppressor see your point and not force your view on your oppressor. So the oppressor, they needed to be persuaded to see the truth instead of being forced to see the truth. And this should happen without any violence. And by this struggle, according to Gandhiji, truth was bound to ultimately triumph. And Mahatma Gandhi believed that this dharma of non-violence could unite all Indians. So that was Mahatma Gandhi's concept of satyagraha, that is truth and passive resistance. That if what you're searching for is true, if what you're fighting for is true, then you don't have to be take up violence, and you don't have to use physical force. You can simply achieve success by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. And so after arriving in India, Mahatma Gandhi first he toured the entire country to get the pulse of the country, to get to know about the suffering, the problems of the people here. And after that he successfully organized satyagraha movements in various places. So the next three what we'll be doing, they are called as the early campaigns of Gandhiji. Now, in 1916, he traveled to Champaran in Bihar, and here it was to inspire the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system. Now, in Bihar, what happened? The workers which were working on the indigo plantations, you know what is indigo?
Yes, ma'am. A color.
Okay. So it is a dye, it is a blue color dye. And so peasants who were working on the indigo plantations, they were forced to sell indigo to the British plantation owners at the price which they had set. And now these prices were very less or very low, and they could not sell it to anyone else. They only had to sell it to the Britishers, and the prices which they had set were so low. And so the condition of the peasants was so bad, and they were not earning any money. And so Mahatma Gandhi he struggled against the oppressive plantation system here, and was able to achieve success in his first campaign. Then in 1917, he organized a satyagraha, and this was to support the peasants of Khera in at Gujarat. Now here the people were affected by a plague and a famine, crop failure. So the crops failed that year, and there was a epidemic also. But the officials they were insisting on the full payment of land revenue, and the people they were asking that the land revenue for that year should be cancelled. But the officials were not listening. And so Mahatma Gandhi he organized a satyagraha for the peasants of Khera, because they were not able to pay revenue that year. So that, and their demand was that the revenue collections for that year should be relaxed. And its third early campaign, it was concerning the mill workers. And this was mill workers against their against the factory owners at Ahmedabad. And so here the mill workers they were made to work for very long hours, their shifts were very long, and they were not paid proper wages, and their working and living conditions were also very poor. So Mahatma Gandhi he led the people or the mill workers at Ahmedabad in their satyagraha, and he was successful in all these three early campaigns. But all these three early campaigns they were related to a particular place or a particular region, like the peasants of Khera, all right, or the people at Ahmedabad, the mill workers at Ahmedabad, or the plantation workers at Champaran in Bihar. And so all these movement satyagrahas were successful, but they were only regional in nature, and they were not nation based. So Gandhiji he was emboldened, made bold by the success that he got in his early campaigns. So in 1919 he decided to launch a nationwide satyagraha or a nationwide strike against the proposed Rowlatt Act. Now let's see what this Rowlatt Act was all about. Now this act it was very hurriedly passed through the Imperial Legislative Council, and though the Indian members unitedly they opposed, but still it was passed. Now according to the Rowlatt Act, the police they could arrest anyone without a warrant and imprison anyone without a trial for a period of 2 years. And so it was against the expression, the freedom of expression of the people, because under this anyone who raised his voice against the British rule or protested, that person could easily be taken up as a political prisoner, and now they did not need any warrant, and no trial was required, and for 2 years you could simply imprison a person just like that. And so, according to Mahatma Gandhi, this act was very cruel and it was very devilish, and it increased the powers of the police also, and it repressed the political activities of the people here. And so Mahatma Gandhi, he wanted a non-violent civil disobedience against such unjust laws. Now, civil disobedience, as the term says, it means a deliberate defying of laws, means a deliberate breaking of laws. Now, when we mean breaking of laws or defying of laws, we don't mean that you go on breaking laws which are for the social order and all that. Here, when we mean deliberate defying or deliberate breaking of laws, we mean those laws which were discriminatory towards the people. And as this law was unjust in nature, so Mahatma Gandhi, he called for a non-violent civil disobedience against this law, and he said that this would start with a hartal on 6th April. And so, rallies, they were organized in various cities, and workers, they went on strike in railways, workshops, shops were closed down. And now the Britishers, they were alarmed because so many people, they means with unprecedented enthusiasm they participated in this, and unprecedented means never known before, never seen before enthusiasm, people participated in this. And so the Britishers, they were obviously alarmed with that, and they were scared that these protesters, they would cut the lines of communications such as the railways and telegraphs, they could disrupt that. And so the British administration, they decided to clamp down on the nationalists, to come down on the nationalists severely with repression. And as a result, local leaders, they were picked up from Amritsar, and Mahatma Gandhi, he was barred from entering Delhi. Then on 10th April, the police in Amritsar, they fired upon a peaceful procession. So people were protesting against this Rowlatt Act, and on 10th April, the police in Amritsar, they fired upon a peaceful procession, and because of that, there were widespread attacks on banks, police, post offices, railway stations. And on 10th April, if you remember in your class 8 books, you have seen that they also arrested two leaders, Saifuddin Kichler and Dr. Satyapal. So, two important national leaders were also arrested during this peaceful procession, and they were also fired upon, which led to attacks on banks, post offices, and railway stations. And as a result of all these, martial law was imposed in Amritsar, and General Tyre, he took up the command. And then is what we know as the infamous Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And on 13th April, the infamous Jallianwala Bagh incident, it took place. And on this day, a large crowd, they had gathered in the grounds of Jallianwala Bagh, and some were here to protest against the government's new repressive policies and this Rowlatt Act, and against the arrest of those two national leaders. But many had come just to attend the Baisakhi fair, because that day was also the day of Baisakhi festival, and many people from the nearby villages, they had come to attend this fair. Now these people, being outside of Amritsar, they did not know that a martial law had been imposed. And General Dyer, what he did, he entered the area and blocked the exit, because, as you all must have heard, this Jallianwala Bagh, it had just one entrance, and the same was the exit also. And on the other three sides, there were just so high walls, and so General Dyer, he blocked the exit point and opened fire on the crowd, and hundreds were killed in this. And his object, what he wanted to achieve, his objective, as he declared later, he told later that he wanted to produce a moral effect. What he wanted to create a feeling of terror in the minds of the Satyagrahis. And so, as this news of Jallianwala Bagh massacre had spread, crowd, they took to the streets in many North Indian states, and so there were strikes and clashes with the government, with the police, and there was attack on government buildings. And the government, it also, the British government, it also responded with terrible brutality. And they tried to humiliate and terrorize the people, and so satyagrahis, they were forced to rub their noses on the ground, and they were made to crawl on the streets and do salam to the sahibs. Means anytime they see a british official passing by, so they need to be come down on all their fours and do a salam, or to crawl on the ground and rub their noses on the ground. And people, they were flogged also, and villages around good Gujranwala in Punjab, which is now in Pakistan, they were bombed also. Now, so much was done to terrorize the people there. And seeing the violence spread, Mahatma Gandhi, he called off this movement. Now, though this Rowlatt Satyagraha, it had been a widespread movement, but still it was just limited to the cities and the towns mainly, and the villages, the masses, they were not into it so much. And Mahatma Gandhi now felt that now was the time for a more mass-based movement in India, and but he knew that no such movement it was possible till the time the Muslims also they came and joined this movement. And so one day, and he wanted to bring the Hindus and the Muslims together, and one way of doing this he felt was to take up the Khilafat issue. And the First World War, it has just ended, and the Ottoman Turkey, it was defeated. And according to the treaty, very harsh terms were meted out to Turkey, and Turkey was partitioned also, and it was divided also, and the powers of the Caliph or the Khalifa of Turkey, they were also reduced. And now, what happened? The Caliph or the Khalifa of Turkey, he was taken up as to be the spiritual head of all the Muslims throughout the world. So he was considered to be the spiritual head of the Islamic world. And now, to defend his temporal powers, temporal means his earthly powers, uh, you know they wanted the Indian Muslims, they wanted that his powers should not be taken from him. But after the treaty of the First World War, his powers were also lessened. So Turkey was divided, and also his powers were also taken away from him, many of his powers. And to defend his powers, Khilafat Ish Committee, it was formed in Bombay in 1919, and a young generation of Muslim leaders like the brothers Ali brothers, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, they began to discuss with Mahatma Gandhi about the action that the Congress together will take up this issue, so that it will obviously wield some uh, rewards. And Gandhiji, he saw that this was a good opportunity to bring the Muslims also under the umbrella of the national movement. So Gandhiji, he was a very smart and intelligent man, and he knew that if the Congress they took up this Khilafat issue, then they will be able to bring in the Muslims also to this national movement. And when Hindus and Muslims will be united together, then only they'll be able to fight the Britishers well. And so Gandhiji, he saw this as a good opportunity to bring Muslims also under the umbrella of the United National Movement. And at the Calcutta session of the Congress in September 1920, he convinced the other leaders that now there was a need to start a non-cooperation movement in support of the Khilafat as well as for Swaraj. So why did they took up this non-cooperation movement? Now, it was basically for the British repression in Punjab, and their policy towards Turkey, and for the attainment of Swaraj. So all the non-cooperation movement, it was started because of these three things. All right. So have you all understood till here? Any confusion? Any question? Class 10th?
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll stop here for today.